Hello, assalamu alaikum. In this video tutorial, I'm going to walk you through how to create Ahar or Muqahar paper for the writing of Arabic calligraphy. Now, the papers that I'm going to be using, the first set that I'm going to do are going to be these standard watercolor sheets. Now, as you know, watercolor sheets are nice and thick, but they aren't really ready for Arabic calligraphy because they will absorb a ton of ink. So we will turn these into the Muqahar paper. Now, Muqahar could be applied to practically any surface, and we're also going to be doing these really fancy silver sheets. Now again, they are finished already in terms of coming from the manufacturer, but they are not Muqahar paper. So if I start to write on them with a qalam, it's actually going to spread really fast onto the surface. And the reason is because this is way too slippery. So for Arabic calligraphy, not only do we need a glossy sheet that doesn't absorb ink, but we need a slight amount of friction as well on the paper that will allow us to control the qalam. So we will be making these into Ahar sheets as well. So let's get started. In terms of the supplies that you're going to need, you will need egg whites. You can get just actual eggs as well, crack them and separate the yolk from the egg whites, and you can use it that way as well. Now, we don't work with a lot of egg whites at one time, so this would be equivalent of 3 eggs at one time. Anything more than that kind of becomes a little bit tougher to handle when we're mixing it. So keep it down to 3 egg whites for one session. Now, in terms of the liquid egg whites, then we're looking at around 250 mils, so about a quarter of a liter. Now, this is absolutely critical. Without this whole process is just not going to work. This is alum, or in Urdu we call this pitkari. Essentially, it's used for pickling, so you should be able to find it in the ethnic grocery stores. I found it in my local Pakistani grocery store, which is Pak Foods here in Milton. Now, I have checked for alum at our standard grocery stores like Metro and Freshco and Superstore, and I wasn't able to find this. Unfortunately, I was able to find powdered alum, but that's not going to work for this purpose. We actually need these solid crystals to work in making our Ahar solution. So that's the second thing we're going to need. And then we will also need cornstarch. Okay, so any brand of cornstarch would work. We would need this. And then this is optional, just a cup of tea. So this is used for dyeing your papers before the process. Now, you don't have to dye the paper. You can just make white paper into Ahar paper as well. But traditionally, the Ahar sheets are colored with tea. If you're gonna go through this whole process, then might as well just add a little bit extra and color these sheets in as well. Okay, so the first step is actually quite simple. We're just gonna take this tea here and just keeping the tea bags. I put 2 tea bags in here so it can give it a nice and bold color. And then we're just gonna go ahead and pour it in this baking tray here. Now, of course, you can use a paintbrush as well, but I like to do it this way here because it gives it a much more uniform feel to the entire sheet. Okay, so let's pour it all out. Make sure there's nothing left in here. Squeeze it all out. Okay. Put this aside, and I'm also going to just move these items out of the way. Now, I will not be coloring the silver sheets. Okay, these already have a very nice finish. It's just meaningless to be putting this under the tea. This is simply for the watercolor sheets. Okay, so make sure that this is all around. Now, your baking sheet doesn't have to be huge. It doesn't have to be as big as a sheet. Basically, what I'm going to do here is I will start from over here. Okay, and so just like this, I'm gonna go ahead and do a couple more sheets of this watercolor paper. And then, of course, we're gonna let it dry. Now it does need to dry for several hours. It has to be perfectly dry before we can move on with the next process, okay? So here we're gonna take this and I'm gonna go ahead and do several of these sheets. So now we're gonna prepare the cornstarch solution here, and we will keep the pot here on low, so between low and medium, and then we're gonna take 1 cup of water, and we are going to get 1 tablespoon of cornstarch here. Now make sure it's not any more than that, otherwise it's going to be very thick. Now you don't want it to be thin either, so you want it somewhere in the middle. So 1 tablespoon of that. Now it's key to just make sure you are stirring this the entire time, otherwise it's going to stick to the bottom. Okay, so once the color turns this way and you can see that it is a thick liquid now, this is the time to turn it off and you have your cornstarch solution ready for application. Okay, so before we go ahead and apply this to all of our sheets, this includes the silver sheet as well, we have to make sure that this is cooled down. You cannot apply this hot because what it's going to do is it's going to expand the paper, and that's really not going to help you in the long run. So make sure that it is cooled down. Now, what is the purpose of this cornstarch liquid here? The idea is that this will fill up any of the spaces in between the fibers of the paper, so it'll make it a very smooth surface. And this is also what allows you to erase or scratch off your artwork, your ink from the sheet of paper that you're going to be scripting. So it is very important that you apply cornstarch to the sheet of paper that you are going to be making into ahar. This is not to be missed, okay? So before we apply, as I mentioned, we're gonna make sure that it is cooled down. Let's go ahead and prepare the main solution here, which is the egg yolk and the alum. Now, this isn't just a nice to have. This is really the main ingredient for making ahar paper. So what happens is alum, when it's combined with egg whites, creates a chemical reaction which turns egg whites into this clear varnish, like very thin kind of a solution, which we go ahead and apply to our sheet of paper. Now, if we just take egg yolks and apply it to a sheet of paper, it's not going to work at all. Your sheets are just going to smell of eggs. There's going to be no coating. It's not going to be ahar paper. So, you know, as I mentioned, this is the most essential step that we take when we are making ahar paper. Now, what I suggest is taking a big chunk here, okay? Again, I warned against using the powdered version because the powdered version is going to go in the egg whites and then there's no way to take it out. So one of the key things that we do here is once we put it in the egg white, we do need to take it out eventually. Otherwise, that clear solution will never be able to stay. It's going to keep on going into this foamy cottage cheesy mix, okay? So that's why we need a big cube so that we can control it and we can take it out when need be. All right. Now this is a very time-taking process. It does require you to keep on mixing the solution for quite a bit. So we're talking about, upwards of 8 to 10 minutes that you got to keep on mixing it to make sure that that final solution finally shows up. So here we go. We're gonna go ahead and mix it in, and I'm gonna start whipping it. So as you can see at this point, it is turning into this creamy, curdy solution here, and we got to keep going. Okay, it's actually gonna become even more solid, like cottage cheese, as I mentioned. Okay, so at this point, this solution is at its thickest form. Now, don't be afraid of this. We gotta keep on whipping it, and when we keep whipping it, it will eventually return back to a liquid format. Okay, so we gotta keep going. Okay, so as you can tell, it's going down from that curdy cottage cheese texture down to a liquid format, but we're not there yet. This is still very thick. Okay, so now we are at our last stage with this, and this is where we're gonna take that piece of alum out and get rid of it. Now that we've taken the alum out, this is essentially a clear solution with just a lot of foam on it right now. And so what we're gonna do is we're gonna let this sit. Now, traditionally, some calligraphers even let this sit for upwards of 3 days. That's not necessary, but I do say at least 6 hours, okay? Because you do need the egg whites, or actually it's not egg white anymore, it is a different solution. It's a different clear solution that is going to separate itself from the foam, okay? So that's why we need to let it sit, and then we go ahead and we use this for our coating. So we're gonna take this, we're gonna cover it up with a plate, and we won't come back to it for several hours now. Okay, so we are back now after several hours, and our sheets here have completely dried up, and this is the shade that they have come back in. Look pretty nice. So we're gonna go ahead and start with the cornstarch coat. Now, you would need only 2 coats of cornstarch if you are using these just for practice. But if you are going to be doing a final work on these, then I do suggest you put 3 layers of the cornstarch. Okay, so if you're putting 2 layers, then you're gonna do 1 layer going sideways, and you let it dry, and then the second layer would be going vertical. That way you'll be able to cover everything and make sure that the cornstarch is gone within all the grooves in every direction. Okay, and then if you're gonna do the third coat, then you just do it horizontal. And then in terms of the egg yolk coating, we usually put only 1 if we are gonna be just practicing on them, but if this is gonna be a final artwork, then I do suggest that you put 2 layers of the egg yolk coating. So let's go ahead and start off with cornstarch. So we'll just mix it up, make sure that it's in a liquid format here. If it gets too thick, then you can mix in some hot water in there, okay, and that should dilute it, but it should be somewhere around here. Yeah, I personally like it a little bit thick like this, so it gives it a nice and thick coat. The brush I like to use is this one here. Honestly, anything that is, just medium firmness is good. Just make sure that it's flat from the bottom. It's not one of those watercolored brushes. And we're gonna go ahead and work our way horizontally. Now, when you are done this, just make sure you go over this one more time, just so there are no bubbles or anything of that nature. Those bubbles could be a real pest later on in the stage, so just make sure that it is flat. Okay, so just like that, I'm going to go ahead and do the rest of the sheets here as well. Just the horizontal strokes for now, and then when this is dry, then we're going to be doing the vertical strokes. Okay, so I'll do the exact same thing here with the silver sheets as well. Remember, we weren't dyeing these, but we are going to be coating them with the cornstarch as well as the egg whites coating. So there we go. Okay, so we are back, and the first layer of the cornstarch has dried up on these sheets, and you can see already it's starting to get a little bit glossy. So I'm going to go ahead and put on the second layer of the cornstarch here. And as mentioned earlier, this is going to be going in the vertical direction here. So I'm going to go ahead and apply this to all of my sheets now. Okay, so the second coating is dry for the cornstarch, and we are going to get started with our last and final coat, and this will be done in the horizontal direction. So we are done with the cornstarch stage, and now we will be putting on the solution that we made with the egg yolks. So since we last filmed making these, this was 2 days ago. So between us preparing this, we had to put the 3 coats of the cornstarch on those. So the whole drying process took a couple of days. So we had given this a chance to sit and separate for 2 full days. And now what we're going to do is we're going to separate the foam from the actual liquid that we're going to be needing. So we're just going to take a spoon and take off all of that foam from the top. You should try your best to get rid of as much as possible, all of it if possible, because you don't want this foam onto your brush. You get the foam on your brush and you're going to have a bunch of bubbles. So to avoid that trouble, make sure that you get rid of as much of this foam as possible. So without further ado, we're going to go ahead and start applying this. Now, what's different about the application of the egg yolk solution is that you need to make sure that the brush goes in deep. Okay, so you need to press down a little bit firmer when you're applying this egg yolk solution, okay? Because it really needs to bind with the cornstarch layer. And also by pressing it down hard, you make sure that there isn't a lot of thick coating at any one spot. So we're going to go ahead and just like this, work the way through. Okay, so now what we can do is we can work our way vertically as well. And what this will do is it'll make sure that this is even out throughout the sheet of paper. So even before having it dry, we can run this second direction vertically. Okay, so just like that, we're gonna work our way through all of the sheets. Okay, so here we go. Here we have our double coated Ahar paper. And look at that. Look at that shine. And it's really not about the shine. It's about having a surface which is ideal for the column to write on. So look at the back, which was the original of the watercolor sheet. And look at the front. Okay. So if we actually have a look at the silver sheets, you'll notice that it actually becomes less shinier than before. So this is the original, and this is after the double layering of the Ahar paper solution. Okay, so it does bring it down, but the whole point is that it is ideal for the scripting of the column. So that's what it looks like. Now, as I mentioned, I am going to share a technique with you that will help you just straighten these sheets, because obviously they're all curled up right now. That's very natural. That's going to happen if you're not going to be using tape to tape these down from the beginning of the process. But it's quite simple. All we do really is we'll take these sheets and just put down a clean sheet of paper, hopefully a glossy sheet, because as we kind of drag this on the bottom, we don't want the surface to be ruined by any means. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to stretch it out landscape. So basically the long sides are going to be on the top and bottom. And then we're just going to make sure that that top side is flat. And then we're going to take two heavy objects. So in this case, I have this piece of wood. I'm going to place that right over here. Okay, and the other thing I have is, excuse me, a full box of ink. Okay, so that should hold down the corners. And now what I'm doing is I'm just folding these right back to the bottom. And now this, you just need to kind of fold this up a little bit, make sure it doesn't crack or anything like that. These are pretty durable, you should be okay. So the actual surface of the Ahar paper, the one that we write on, should always be outside. Okay, so now what we're going to do is we're going to just start rolling it this way. Okay, and then we can take these off, and if we just hold it like this, or if you want to put it in a cup for even a minute or so, excuse me, for even a minute or so, I've just been holding this for the last probably 20 seconds. If I open this, it's lost all its, well, most of its curliness, and now it's fairly flat. And then you can just go ahead and store it like a regular sheet of paper. Okay, so same thing applies for the smaller sheets here. Okay, for these you may not even need a heavyweight, especially if they're smaller. You just unroll this and from the bottom, we're just going to be rolling backwards. Okay. And just roll it up a little bit, make sure it doesn't crack anywhere. The whole point is to uncurl that natural flex. Okay, so you hold it like this for about 10 or 20 seconds and it'll become straight for you. Okay, so here we are. Here are the final products of the Muqahar process. Now, for demonstration purposes, I went all the way through with these, which means that 3 layers of cornstarch and 2 layers of the egg yolk solution. But as I mentioned earlier, you don't need to do that if this is just for practice purposes. If this is just for practice, then you need only 2 layers of cornstarch and 1 layer of the egg yolk solution. Okay. Now, the last thing that we need to do before we actually start writing on these is that we need to burnish these, okay? So you can get a traditional burnisher, or you can use really anything that's a flat surface, a flat and smooth surface. So if you have one of these ink pots, you can use the flat part of it, or you can use one of these. I'm just using a block along with these baking sheets just to make sure that it doesn't scratch my sheet of paper. So in this case, all we're going to do is we're going to hold this together and we're going to go both ways. So we're going to go horizontal and vertical. Okay, so this is what it looks like. Okay, and if I was using the top of the ink pot here, then again, simple. Take it and we're going to squeeze this. Okay, this is pretty smooth in itself, so I don't need to use the baking sheet. Okay, and just like that, we're going to make sure that everything is flat on this. So when we put our paintbrush on this, then essentially this is going to result in ridges here and there. So this process basically gets rid of those ridges and makes sure that you have a perfectly smooth surface to write on. Okay, so now we did the horizontal direction. Now we're gonna go ahead and do the exact same thing in the vertical direction. Okay, so here we are. This sheet is now completely ready to be written on. If you want, what you can also do is take some fine powder, some talcum powder, or even the corn flour, and just put it onto the sheet, and with a cotton swab, just rub it all over. It'll make it even smoother if need be. I personally don't do that. I think this is good enough. So here we are, the Muqahar process. Now, obviously, this whole thing seemed like it was a tedious task, but let me tell you that once you prepare the solution, both the corn flour solution and the egg yolk solution, then you can really knock out like 20 or 40 or 50 sheets in one go. And come to think of it, if you like scripting on the Muqahar paper, then you're going to be saving yourself a lot of money, because if you go and buy these, especially this size over here, it's not going to be less than $15. And in just one go, in a couple of days, I was able to create all of these for myself. And there have been times where I've created upwards of 50 sheets, especially these smaller sizes. I'm able to knock them out pretty quickly. So this is something that's going to save you a lot of time. It's also, personally, I find it quite fun. So if you have any questions, please let me know. Until next time, take care, and assalamu alaikum.